Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of The Vulnerable, a series airing this summer. And it's going to be a really interesting conversation today because it's mine and Kimberly's first guest with Nick. And it's going to be a really good conversation where Nick's going to be sharing his journey. And Nick has been on the podcast before a couple of years ago now. But this episode is going to be about seeing how Nick's doing at the moment, delving into his journey and what the word vulnerable or being vulnerable means to him. So I'm gonna get you guys to introduce yourself. I'll get Kimberly if you do your introduction, and then we can have Nick do his introduction after you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kimberly, better known as @strong_self-love on TikTok and Instagram. I'm here co-hosting with my favorite person, Mason. We've been connected several years now. We met through Instagram, and I think Instagram is a wonderful place to meet those with chronic illnesses, to meet all over the world. So I'm definitely looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, it is great. It's crazy how you meet people online. Really, isn't it? Especially for Instagram. Is how we met Nick as well. So, Nick, if you wouldn't
Yeah,
mind doing your introduction.
yeah, I'm really excited as well. It's really good to see you guys. I feel like, gosh, now through Instagram we go way back, even though we're all in different corners of the globe. So it goes to show how much we can really get connected when we put ourselves out there in the chronic illness community. I'm also excited to help contribute, be the first episode, get an exciting first story and journey for people at home to, drive home the point of vulnerability and to, see whatever venture you guys have from here, only go up. So I'll remind them if they're watching, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow, wherever you're listening. Um, share the content and give these guys a shout out, good, because they've been working hard. And I'm just the fill-in. I'm just the guest today.
Yeah. It is great to have you on, Nick. Because it has been a journey because I think 2020-ish we started speaking, and then we've been on each other's podcasts ever since then. So it's great to have you here today for this series. It's something I've been doing more recently, just doing different series on the podcast about certain topics rather than doing series 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Having it more kind of in order, I think. But it's going to be great to have you on for the first episode, Nick. So Nick, for the viewers and listeners who if they don't know much about you or what your condition is, would you mind going into a little bit more detail about your illness?
Of course, yeah. This all ties back into what we've all been trying to do over the past couple of years. Aside from just sharing the stories, which is important for empowerment, we're also trying to be advocates, trying to empower individuals to go out and advocate for themselves too, because we want to raise the general consensus of our whole population, which right now is, gosh, I think it's 1 in 5, 1 in 6 young people has a chronic illness or health condition of some sort. So, yeah, but my story, my journey. I was born a relatively healthy individual. As I've gotten older, I've heard tidbits from family and friends that may have started pointing to some symptoms early in life, but nothing that cast me aside as any really thing out of the ordinary, out of normal. It wasn't really until I started pushing myself to the very limit physically and mentally at about 19, 20 years old that I started to develop my chronic symptoms. I was eventually given a diagnosis of Crohn's disease, but I was manifesting a handful of different symptoms across the board, from ulcerative colitis, IBS, and other things, even colon cancer, which was quite worrying at the time. But obviously, with additional screenings and additional tests, which people listening are all too familiar with, you kind of narrow it down to a particular diagnosis, and then you have to go from there. Unfortunately, that process for me took about 9 months, and during which time, of course, with Crohn's disease, it's a digestive autoimmune problem, and it's really difficult to ingest food and really have any sort of energy whatsoever. Your body and immune system is just fighting itself. And so I lost about, I want to say about 65 pounds, if I remember correctly, just over about that 9-month period. And I was doing my best fighting to try to stay in school and the military. But it was so obvious what was happening that my sergeants came up to me and said, "Hey, like, we went out of our way to find out that you were on a prescription. Like, you got to fill us in to what was going on." So I was placed on medical leave to figure out what was going on. And through a couple hospitalizations, they finally confirmed that it was Crohn's disease. And unfortunately, I didn't realize, tying this all back in together, how vulnerable it made me. I just thought, okay, well, I can just take some prescriptions and get on with my life and get on with my day because I'm a young man with goals here. And I didn't know how wrong I was. Apparently, maybe not wrong, naive might be the better word to use. The word that the military used to describe a condition like that was undeployable. So I suppose there's some sort of type of vulnerability factor when it comes to like your dependability, like to be able to be called on to go out to some new conflict or war that's happening. And in hindsight, I completely understand, but at the time, obviously, it was very devastating. Flash forward to today, that was back in 2015. Ever since then, it's been a separate journey of trying to learn what that means for me, learning what that means for a population in general, and then specifically also like how it can help other people with Crohn's disease. Like we talked a little bit about the advocacy and giving back. I try to coach individuals on a one-on-one basis to try to improve their symptoms. And if they want to just get back to a good quality of life, that's great. But then I specialize in people that also want to increase their athletic performance or maybe some like physique goals. But if they have a particular competition, like a 5Ks are really popular this time of year, just coming out of the winter time, that kind of thing. And with those past, gosh, now it's been 7-8 years, my life has taken a completely different turn. I thought I would be, flying fighter planes for the U.S. Air Force and just, be running right up into a captain status now. But the direction that my life took, I can sense that there's a lot of vulnerabilities along the way. So if you want me to now, I can kind of delve into what that means kind of in my day-to-day now and what that was like at first. So people can kind of sense some of the differences. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You learn to manage things better. And upon speaking to middle-aged and kind of golden-aged and elderly people that have developed chronic illnesses and dealt with for decades, you kind of have to take a step back and say, okay, I need something that's sustainable, not just over the long term, but something that I can get through just today, even if I have a bad day. And so with Crohn's disease, I've learned for me, that looks like a very particular type of sleep, eating, and a supplementation pattern. And once that's allowed me to get back to a baseline, then it can kind of fudge the variables once they've been maintained for a while to help me in a particular area. Say, if I don't have energy at the beginning of the day, I might start working on one of those things, or my food placement, morning supplements versus I'll just take a cup of coffee. Whereas if I was that 17 or 18, 19-year-old kid who was still in the military and going to classes or something, I wouldn't have looked at any of those same variables in my life and done the internal work. I just would have added something on top of the routine and made it more difficult, made me more anxious and jittery, and probably would have made it worse at the end of the day that with the energy spike. My day-to-day at first seemed like a lot of horrifying bathroom trips. I was getting ulcers around my mouth area, getting pain up and down my esophagus when trying to eat. There was sores and problems with bowel movements trying to pass. Strictures, fissures are common. Unfortunately, some of the initial diagnostic testing and even colonoscopies doesn't really show the anti-inflammatory markers that I give. So I have to do special then magnetic imaging to show where the internal structures were that were inflamed and showing the dilation from the Crohn's disease. So I think in hindsight, that's what led to the months of buildup of the symptoms, not knowing, not being able to pinpoint it where it was, even given the extra diagnostic testing. So nowadays, I get a colonoscopy once a year, and I get blood work every 3 to 4 months to stay on top of all the markers that are looked at for any inflammatory, my immune system fighting itself. And the only medication I take aside from just like the regular health supplements is Humira. It's the new citrate-free formula. Seems to be very popular. Unfortunately, it's kind of difficult to get without insurance. But I'm open to, talking and delving into any of the details now about any of the things that I mentioned so far.
Yeah, I'm on Premiere as well. I think we said that. I said that last time we spoke, Nick. Yeah, it is very. It's always very interesting, like the healthcare systems between US and UK, because of course we have an NHS, which our medication gets paid for, and of course yours doesn't. So it's a little bit harder to get, which is, I guess, on your point of view, quite annoying, because you have to pay for your like maybe Humira and stuff, because it is a very expensive medication, really, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. I guess here, maybe that's just my American bias showing. But one of the points that I can point to about the vulnerability is being backed into a corner when having to decide where you're going to come up with insurance or some sort of payment for a medication that determines you to just get through the next couple of weeks. And I don't want to just say that this is only for Crohn's, right? Like insulin patients are all too aware of this, especially that comes off the top of my head. But muscle wasting diseases, cancer patients, organ transplant patients, those are all ones that come to mind that have the same issue just because of the American system. And just another layer of that vulnerability topic that you mentioned of when I was in, I'll spin this a little bit more to me, just kind of because this is my episode. I want to try to make sure that we're tracking it back. I tend to speak generally. That was never a worry of my going into the military, because you get all your benefits and coverage is paid for by them, right? So, and they expect you to be a relatively healthy individual, so you're not expected to use it very much. There's kind of a win-win situation. So by the time I turned 26, I thought I was just going to be in the military and be able to cover myself. But what happens was, here in the US, Mason, when you turn 26, you jump off of your parents' coverage if they have it through an employer or their self or whatever like that. So when I wasn't in the military, I panicked, and that's when I jumped on the Humira and have started this extra issue of sourcing, even though Humira itself has been generally working for me.
Yeah, I think as well with the army and military, I think they from where like in the UK, they are very they don't really understand like maybe illnesses or anything really, because you have to, even if you have maybe difficulties with misunderstanding maybe what they're telling you to do, they will maybe push you away, which can be really hard, especially because of course having a chronic illness, you're going to have whatever job you do, you want your employers or the people there to understand as much as you, and it's really hard if they don't understand from when you're coming from, because they may think you're lazy because you can't do something, or you're not maybe as fast as them, maybe getting up early in the morning, which is something I don't like to do, but I imagine that's probably the hardest part, or one of the hardest parts, getting up super early.
Yeah, well said. Well said, especially with the digestive problem. And, when nature calls, it's time for nature, nothing else, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because when the toilet, like before my diagnosis of Crohn's, it's very bizarre. It's really weird, really, because that's a stigma, I think, around a chronic illness. They say it's a pooping disease, and it's not. It's one of the parts of it. I won't say it's not, because it is. But in my personal opinion, like before I had Crohn's, I would go to maybe number 2 at night, and now all of a sudden it's in the morning. So maybe Crohn's has changed my process of going on when going. But like if I had to get up at 6 in the morning, I would have to go sleep really early the following day, just so I can process the amount of hours I get to sleep, and so I can go when I want to go. That would be my major worry if I was working in that kind of force. But yeah, it's really hard, I imagine.
Indeed. And to not make it seem like we're venting about any particular symptom base, maybe describing it this way for the listener or viewer at home might make sense. Like, it's not just a pooping disease. Mason's completely right. That made me laugh but it's completely true. There's an understanding that your gut flora and the bacteria in from the lining way up near your esophagus all the way down to the colon, it plays a huge role into this, and that's extremely connected to your nervous system and your brain. So if you're harboring a lot of stress there in your gut, and or your gut flora is thrown off, your whole body system is just wrecked. And one of those systems that seems to be impacted the most is the endocrine system, leading to hormone production, thyroids. And if your thyroid's wacky and your estrogen's wacky, those seems to be two markers that are all over the place with people with active Crohn's. So there seems to be a general systemic impact where so in general, again, I'm not complaining, I'm saying it's not just a pooping disease, because we have evidence to show, and we are led to believe that it's a whole body functional immune issue. And sometimes it manifests a little bit differently, like with the UC and IBS in various ways, but then you can see how Crohn's, the most severe part of it, is more interrelated to other autoimmune problems versus just a tummy ache.
That's it, and it is annoying when people do say it is just a pooping disease, because it is to some people, I guess, because like I'm not one of those people who goes constantly a day. You hear loads of Crohn's patients that say they've been on the toilet maybe 3 or 4 hours a day, and I've never experienced that. I don't know about you, Nick, if you've ever experienced that, like going a lot in a day.
Yeah, I could definitely comment on that. I'll go quickly though. Probably the worst part of my flares, I was going 7 to 10 times per day. And I'll end with just saying baby wipes are a godsend. Kimberly, please feel free to just interject. Cut me off by all means.
No, I was laughing because I was always a person that thought, Crohn's disease, it is just, so it was interesting to hear that it's a lot more than just that. And I liked you guys' attitudes toward it. I mean, you guys have came to terms with like, okay, I have this, now what are we gonna do to like be much better about it,
Yeah, I've had to look into those smaller pieces. Like I may not be able to get up and be the hero like Hercules tomorrow, but I can get up tomorrow and be like 1% better. And so most of that's like sitting back, accepting where you are, accept, and like getting a real like non-delusional perspective of where you are, so you can take that 1% step and get a little bit better.
Yeah, I love that. That's all about like self-love as well. Like, just getting there, just that 1%. So love that.
Maybe I can tie this back into the vulnerability piece too. Like as a young man, in a society where toxic masculinity is like really common and rampant, I was struggling to like find a new role and path where I could do it in like a non-negative toxic way, because of how now I perceive myself as like this weak provider in now a society. I didn't see myself as like part of the in crowd, like the producers, the creators, the people that are going out and getting it, like the new generation. I'm like, holy shit, now I gotta like take a step back from that, focus on the self-love instead, my journey, and like see where I can like take glimpses into that, maybe a piece here, a piece there, like, and be happy with what I'm able to do versus being that high-speed fighter pilot dude that was, going to live a really high-speed lifestyle, had to slow way down. And I didn't realize how much that was going to make me feel vulnerable, like on an emotional level. Forget the day-to-day, like all the stuff I have to do that it impacts the quality of life. Like emotionally, I was a broken young man trying to find a way and a path through something that nobody close to me had dealt with, and nobody knew around me what was going on, right? Because on a piece on top of it, I was trying to hide it to try to just continue. I didn't know that this was going to be something that I had to stop, break, pivot, and go somewhere else with. So hopefully that was a good way to tie that all back into the vulnerability piece. It may sound like it's all safe and steady approach, but I've had many a days where I've just cried about it and not known what to do. And you kind of forget about all the good stuff that you have built up and started doing. It's important not to regress, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have been there too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're not alone. Like I liked how you said your toxic masculinity, because like as a female, you know, and especially coming from like a Hispanic community, you know, the girl is supposed to get married by 20, have like 10 kids, cook for the husband, whatever. And it's just like, no, I can't. And I don't want that life. You know, like I rather travel, talk about my illness, you know. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm fine with like, okay, I can't cook, but I can brush my teeth. You know what I mean? Just so simple stuff. It's like, okay, so whatever. This is my life. Gotta
Yeah,
live with it, right?
if a good day is getting out of bed for you, you're gonna
Yeah.
want, you know, people in your life that understand that too. So if you need to start from scratch and build that foundation back up, then by all means. But thank you for not helping me feel alone. And I hope someone at home that's listening cannot feel alone too. And maybe follow you guys on your journey through this, and you know, we can all build a community here.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like with crying, actually, I'm one of those people that doesn't like to cry in front of people. Like I would cry. Um, I would hide it in because I don't like. I don't know. Like if I was crying in front of people, they would just compliment me, saying, "I hope you're okay. We're here for you." But I don't want to feel that. I'd rather cry on my own than have people feel sorry for me. I guess that's to do what you're saying, Nick, as well, being like with that like people being toxic as well. Because
Yeah.
it's all about how people see you. Like if people see you as a person that doesn't cry and quite positive, um, because that's how I think I focus around maybe other people more than I do myself, which is why I don't like to cry in front of people because I want them to see the way they see me. Um, but yeah, I have cried. Like there might be a situation where I could not help it, not crying, but if I've had an accident or um, not Crohn related, but I've had a few accidents. I don't want to say it because it may be a bit too um bad for people to see it. I had an accident um when I was younger, and it wasn't very good. But yeah, I did cry. But I guess as I get older, um, it's just it's a fear of what people will say and the way you don't want to be seen.
Yeah. If I can comment and ask a question back, is that okay, Mason?
Yeah, of course.
Um, my only comment is, yeah, I've had a handful of those. Like, I'll like shed a couple tears, like have a moment to myself. But when I was like looking off in the distance with that 1,000-yard stare, I was thinking about those like open sobbing, like I've got snot running down my face, like open sobbing sessions. I've definitely had a handful of
Yeah.
those. And yeah, I like to be alone too, and that's kind of what I wanted to ask about. I don't mind if I like shed a tear or two around, like if I'm having a tough moment and someone is like can be there and they want to be around. I'm like, cool, thanks, man. But if I'm having those really really tough moments, I don't know if you're related to this at all too, but I wanted to get your sense on it. Is it because maybe there's a lack of a sense of like no level of empathy can understand this, or like I wouldn't want someone to try to be empathetic enough to get to this level, because I've often thought I wouldn't wish this upon my worst enemies. Like, so why me? And like, so I not only do I not want people to come in and try to relate to help me, but I almost like am trying to even protect them from that. Do you relate to that anyway?
Yeah, I do because like I don't when I'm around friends and because they know I have Crohn's and I don't go into any depth about it because I don't expect them to understand it like me. And if I was crying in in a public place and they would you get crowded, don't you? I think it's about that your limits and your distance and the thing like with empathy it's it's really annoying. It's really hard how we feel because say a friend, a family friend of a friend maybe has passed away, and you don't know them as well, and maybe if
Mm.
you're not upset personally, if you're not upset, they may make you feel bad because you're not maybe crying or for them, which it's hard because to be honest you're not going to be upset if you don't know that person directly and emotionally, which is really hard because it's not being mean. it's just how it really is.
That's human nature. That's human
Yeah.
nature. Yeah.
Yeah, because like if someone passed away, like if it's a person that you know every day and love, you of course you're going to be sad, and a friend is going to say, I'm sorry to hear that. That's a normal thing. But if someone expects you to be sad for them, that's when it just gets a bit toxic, I think. Yeah. But
Kimberly, did you have anything to comment on that in the sense of empathy?
yeah.
Well, definitely want to hear your thoughts.
Well, as I don't know if it's just because it's a female thing, but I cry a lot. Like, and there's no shame in it. Like, I'm a strong
Uh,
woman. I think you can tell by my Instagram. But I think it's also necessary to cry. Like, I mean, in order to be human, we have to have feelings. We have to cry. We have to feel pain. So I think it's all stuff that we can't avoid. I think we just have to come to terms with it. Like, something that has helped me was I had to learn how to forgive myself. Even though this sickness, I did not cause it, but I had to allow myself to stop feeling sorry for myself, to, put myself out
yeah.
there and just be comfortable with my own self. So which is the whole like
does that help you
love
receive
thing.
the empathy too? Like, does
Oh
it help you
yes,
receive the empathy? That doesn't
definitely.
make you uncomfortable like me and Mason.
No, because that's how it was at first, which is why I wouldn't talk about my sickness. I didn't want people to feel bad for me. And versus like now people have said when they see me in pain, they're not like, oh, I'm so sorry. They're like, you're amazing. It's crazy how you're still smiling even though you're like in pain. Like it's beautiful. And I think once you come to the terms to you're like, okay, so these feelings are natural for me and you can stop feeling bad for yourself, that's when you can really like receive love and kindness from others.
Yeah.
And like from yourself too. That was a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it
I,
starts. I like that.
I actually have a question for both of you because ever since I was diagnosed with Crohn's, beforehand I always was worried about what other people thought of me and like how I was how I would be around certain things. I wouldn't be myself. But when I got diagnosed with Crohn's, I all of a sudden life changed. When you get diagnosed with a chronic illness, and then because at that point anything can happen, you don't know what's going to happen the following morning. You don't know how you're going to wake up. You don't know if you're going to be exhausted, and you don't know how you're going to be. But my question to you is: do you was that similar to you? Like as soon as you got diagnosed with your chronic illness, or maybe shortly after, um, did you come to a sense where you don't you, you didn't care about what people thought of you, like with hate wise, and stuff like that? So how did you guys feel?
Nick, you want to go
Kim,
first?
you go
Oh,
first. You go first. I got to think about this one.
okay. So it was definitely hard when I first got diagnosed, and I did not want to tell anyone. For the same reason, going back, I didn't want people to feel bad for me. Um, but as I grew up and I started accepting myself and accepting others to be there for me because I was one that always wanted to do everything by herself. And until I came to terms with like it's okay to ask for help. Like it's not bad. And I think people are more happy because some people like don't know whether or not they can help. And some 9 times out of 10 it's like you're quiet on both sides. So when you actually say, hey, can you help me? It's actually really good for the other person because they're like, okay, so I'm not being insensitive by helping you. So I think it's all a matter of, perception and, it takes time. I mean, getting diagnosed with a chronic illness, especially like knowing that it's going to be a lifelong illness, it's not something it's expected for you to be like, okay, the next day, it's going to take a while, but I promise you, like, when you actually get to that point, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's taken a long time for me to get there too. Even before my sickness, in diagnosis and everything, I wouldn't say that I felt really on stage, really in front of anybody's eyes. Like I didn't feel out of the ordinary. It wasn't until my diagnosis and working through a couple months of feeling like everybody's eyes were on me, but then I actually realized, no, I'm even more invisible than I even was before. Maybe the ego was getting in the way to start, but I really realized, okay, I was just a number trying to make my way and make a difference, climbing up the ladder. But then after the diagnosis, you're like, you truly become invisible. It becomes even harder to fight for really a place in anything or a stake wherever you go. And so it was easy for me to kind of shut out the perceptions that I was like feeling myself coming from other people. So the phenomenon that you're talking about, I didn't really take it completely in to begin with, but once it set in, it was kind of boom, it was there. And ever since then, it's been in like a positive invisibility. Like nobody might know about us in the grand scheme of things, but that's okay, because that's the kind of the idea. We're trying to make a name and a word for the entire population in general, because we're all in the background, just kind of like a silent majority.
Yeah. I completely agree, Nick and Kimberly, because I think it takes time as well. Like I think till 2020, it's I think when we had the pandemic and the lockdowns were that's where it's. I thought that for me, because that's where maybe other people could know how I felt. Maybe in the constant lockdowns, that's how us chronic illness people can feel. Like just been locked in because of our illness. And I
remember, just to your point, I remember a couple posts went viral. I was like, now all the rest of you people know how we feel, and it like went viral on a bunch of the chronic illness pages. Sorry to cut you off, but just to your point.
Yeah, I love that, Nick, because not being mean to them, but I just loved when people were locked down too, because you just know how I felt, and you see people moaning. You see people who maybe don't have a chronic illness saying, "Oh, I want to go out. I want to go out." And I said, I've had Crohn's now, maybe I think 6 or 7 years this year, and I've had times where I've been alright, but I think it's the best time for us, really, because we didn't feel alone as we have done. It was a time where people knew maybe us a little bit, where they didn't understand us, but like with COVID, and it's still about now, and it is annoying how people are just very ignorant towards it, and just I've brushed it aside, because there was we have an NHS app in the UK, and on this app there was it was a checker to see if people around you have coronavirus, and I think last week it got taken down. Now, when COVID rates are still there, so it's almost like over here in the UK, it's been completely forgotten about. I went to an event, I think about 2 weeks ago, and I was speaking about sport and being more including of people. And it was about autism as well, but the main thing about the whole presentation was and workshop was about to include people in sport, and introduce new sports as well for maybe people who can't do it. And after it all, people come speak to me, and which brings the vulnerable part into it, is where I would say I don't do handshakes, because people come to you to do a handshake, don't they? To meet you and greet you, and I explain why. I explain I'm vulnerable. I take medications that risk my life, and it's very scary stuff. And most of them were all right around it, but yeah, it's just these precautions we have to take, I think.
It's a good point. How easily it gets forgotten. That's your point there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's great. Yeah. Hits the nail on the head over here too, man. And some people's eyes, it's as if it's never happened. And that's funny, because I was just going to make the point that that if I looked on the bright side of that, it helped me make sure I was keeping a grateful mindset that the chronic illness taught me in the first place. Don't take for granted that you just get up and go every day and just do whatever you want to do all the time without repercussions on your body, mind, heart, spirit, all that kind of stuff. Like suddenly people were there with us, and like they were feeling the effects of outside forces outside of their control, and their lives and livelihood were put at stake. And we understood that. And now, all like you said, it's how quickly has that been forgotten? Yet here we still are, like trying to be grateful for that mindset, and like life goes on.
Yeah. I think especially with hygiene, I found it really crazy throughout the past couple of years how many
Mm.
people like I actually the other day I went to local football match. By the time this come out, it'll be a few months. But I went to a football match and I was in the car and I was watching people across the road. It had this burger van where people get their food and stuff, and then you on the side you have your ketchups, what you can put in, and of course, you've got people putting everything in, but what they're doing is everyone's touched this ketchup, haven't they? Everyone's touching the ketchup, and then in my mind, I'll be washing my hands as soon as I put the hot dog and I put the ketchup on the maybe hot dog. I'll be
Oh
washing my
no.
hands, and then all these people are not doing that. You've got people like
And then just go right for it.
eating it,
Yep.
and they'll like sucking their lips and fingers and I'm in shock and me and my family in the car saying we
Yeah.
can't watch this. I can't believe people are doing it. It's absolutely crazy. And before the match, I went upstairs. I was hungry. I wanted maybe some food for the match, and there was it's called a Portman pie because the stadium's called Portman Road, so it kind of links into the name of the pie. And I thought I'm gonna have one, and then before I've even started, I go to where you get your pies, and like the the lady at the till was touching money, and she put her hands on the bun on the top of the pie to test if it's ready, like if it's okay to eat. And I thought I'm okay. If you
Mhm.
did it with a glove, I might have been alright, but
Sure.
you just
Right.
don't know where people's hands have been, and especially seeing all this hygiene, you would think anyway, without a chronic illness, you would be hygienic, and you'd think about these little things. It's like when you go up escalators, touch lifts. You can have a tissue maybe, or just those things. Maybe we're thinking we're being over the top, but really it's just about hygiene in general.
Well said, man. To your point, I'm gonna go back to the ketchup bottle. This is even more horrifying thought. How many times do you think they wipe it down for the next time they go back to the next football match and the next football match and the next football match? And all those people's hands are just gotten on the same one. They just fill it back up. I'm sure they don't,
Yeah,
wipe and clean the sides of it.
no, I don't think
And
so either.
that's what you're saying. They would just put it right on top and then
Yeah,
just eat it pretty much
yeah,
right after immediately. And I'm just like, oh
yeah,
God,
yeah.
oh no.
They might have the
That's why we had
tissue.
a pandemic in the first place, guys.
Yeah, 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 and we wonder why we had this pandemic. Not surprising at all. If we see
No.
hundreds of people doing that, I bet they're lovely. I bet the hot dog's nice. Maybe the after effects won't be though.
Yeah, maybe they get a taste of what it's like with Crohn's.
Mm, yeah. But
Oh gosh.
I do enjoy to watch that and just to point out how many people are doing it. And it's rare I saw even one person wash their hands. Uh, um, but yeah, S- and it's just stuff like that you see, and I think the worst one is escalators and going into shops, people holding the rails, and um, I would only hold a rail if it was necessary. Um, but when I was younger, I didn't, and I fell off the escalators because I didn't hold it on, purely because I didn't want to touch what everyone else has touched. Because this is before I even
Mm,
had Crohn's, and
yeah.
but maybe I should have held it
You,
on.
you definitely become aware of it when you start autoimmune medication, whether it's tablets or injections or whatever. That becomes a thought that's in the back of your head, and suddenly you see the world a little bit differently.
Yeah, it is, and like it is kind of I guess a reality check, um, because I guess the ones who get these chronic illnesses, I think we know um we are well I wouldn't say we're lucky, but we are capable of coping with it in ways. I think that's why we have these conditions so we can bring a light to our communities and the community just to reach out to people and support them and be advocates like we are today.
Yeah.
I will
Well said, man.
say, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. I will say, going back to you, Mason, having a chronic illness, and also what you said, Nick, that you it really changes your life. Like, not only on stuff that you do like physically, if not, it also changes like who you thought your friends were. Like, I know that before I started talking about my illness openly, I mean, I had so much friends. I mean, I felt lucky, but they were more like party friends, like friends to go out. And I swear to God, when I got the stroke, two of those friends from that big group, only two of them came to see me at the actual hospital, and they're the only ones that I've stayed in touch with. And I found more support like online and through social media and than I did in real life. Like, it's like you're starting over, and like you're accepting like how you want to be treated, you're accepting like your boundaries and stuff like that. So it's great to find a community of people that understand that, you know.
Oh gosh, yeah, even more well said.
Yeah.
It might be. I know we're getting close to the end of the time here, so in line with what you've guys been saying, if anyone wants to reach out to me, has liked what I've been saying and just wants to chat about what's been going on, or has any questions about, increasing their performance in particular ways, just wants a mindset health shift, um, that we're building. My Instagram handle, White Dragon Training. You can find me pretty much everything at that. Nick Ruffini is my name. You can message me on any of those platforms. I'd also like to hear where you guys are going to be posting these later on, where people can go and follow your info too.
Yeah. I will definitely. I'll send everything to you, Nick. When it goes out and or goes live, which is live at the moment for the listeners and people watching today. I'm gonna let Kimberly. Do you want to have like say anything else? Just any last things as well?
A little plug yourself.
Yes, my name is Kimberly. It was a pleasure, talking to you, Nick. If anyone wants to reach out to me, follow me on Instagram and TikTok at strong_self-love. My DMs are always open, and I also have a podcast where I have a segment called Wisdom Wednesday called Self-Love Sister. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I do have scleroderma, Raynaud's, and APS for any of those wondering.
Thank you. And to anyone else who is seeing this today, you can find me, as I'm sure you're aware, autistic advocate for Crohn's on Instagram and on Facebook. My journey with Crohn's disease and autism, and it is going to be a really good series. It started so well, and each episode is going to be different. We might have someone about a different chronic illness, which is why we've made this broad in this series. But it's great to start off with Crohn's, because me and Nick have Crohn's here, and Kimberly can relate in ways with her chronic illness as well. And I'm sure we do have a few guests lined up which have Kimberly's chronic illness too. So I'm sure she'll be taking the lead when we have guests that relate to her, and she will know more about her chronic illness than me. So it'll be I think it'd be interesting to hear more about yours, because I think the first episode we did actually, Kimberly, I actually learned a few things about what you were saying about your chronic illness, which I didn't know. So even in the episodes that we've done before, on our podcast, which was really interesting. But I'm sure to anyone who wants to listen or play back to that first episode, that is available now. It was available in last week when we had the first episode. Or this week.
I'm definitely excited. I'm excited for those episodes too, and learn a little bit more.
Yeah,
I'm excited to have someone. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm excited to have someone who has scleroderma because I feel so left out.
Yeah,
just guys.
Yeah,
it's not the kind of rarity you want, right?
Yeah,
but if you're listening to out there, make sure you go follow the Facebook page for that Mason has set up too. I think that's a great spot to have a sense of community. Everyone can comment on things and be in the sense there. And also, I forgot to mention that I'm in a podcast as well. I'm in a pain and performance podcast for people that are with also chronic pain, not just chronic health symptoms and with a diagnosis. Some people that are out there going through life just have some sort of chronic joint or nerve issue and don't even realize it. So we kind of span the different field, talk a little bit more about the nervous system, meditation, woo-woo, consciousness kind of stuff that it's kind of the other side of the coin. So if you're interested in that, that's the Pain and Performance podcast, but you can find that on YouTube under my White Dragon training.
Yeah.
So if you guys ever also want to have me back on as a guest anytime, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
You want to do a panel, just let me know.
Nick, you have to send me that podcast. So I would love to see it and have a look. And in the future, I think it'll be good if maybe we all did a series together, perhaps, about something maybe, because I know we're all very busy, but it'd be great to have you on again. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to more episodes of this series where we don't know how many we're gonna have yet, but we just play it by ear. And I think we may have a reunion episode as well. So Nick, maybe you can come back at the end, and meet some other people in the chronic illness community involved in this in the Vulnerable series. To anyone listening and watching today, we hope you've enjoyed it as much as us. If it's morning, night, evening for you, enjoy the episode. And we will see you next time when we have a new guest in the episode. It's going to be really cool. And yeah, from me, Kimberly, and Nick, we hope you have a nice rest of your day. Enjoy your lunch, dinner, breakfast. But thank you guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.